contracting officers and contracting specialists, and he creates acquisition strategy that achieves superior results. His FedSim Homeland Security Acquisition Group does the contracting that supports over $5 billion in the complex projects for the Department of Homeland Security. You have the rest of the biography, Michael?
Yeah, I was going to say, I got to get a shorter bio there.
No, but it's really good. It's very impressive. So, welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. So, we heard people talk kind of more at the strategic level. So, as a now 1 year in supervisor level in GSA, I'm going to give you some of the tactical level. And while I've spent time leading teams as a contracting officer, so leading teams in somewhat formally because you have the power of the pen, but at the same time you're not their boss, so you're not motivating them from that perspective, but leading those teams to better results. And then also talking about my time as a team lead, which is not a supervisory role, so you're able to influence people more informally but still have workload assignments. And then now as responsible for, hey, this is your performance rating at the end of the year, which is an unfortunate condition of government. I think as the mission of government has started to shift, the understanding of how to motivate and lead folks is very important. In government, one of the things you really don't have the luxury of doing is incentivizing people through monetary gains, right? Everybody's kind of at that GS pay scale level, and people top out very quickly. So in FedSim, we have an organization that manages very complex programs and partners with organizations that have very complex missions. My sector does Homeland Security work. John over there works in a sector that does work for Department of Defense. So you kind of have to be there with a shared understanding of what kind of quality do you want to get delivered to your customers, what results are you looking to do there, and break the traditional mold from government where you want to show up between core hours and this is my AWS day that I'm supposed to have off every week, and how do you motivate people to go that extra mile and give them the option to choose whether or not they want to work within that traditional bureaucracy, which unfortunately is one of the things that you're forced to do as a manager in government, or give them the option to choose to go beyond and excel on that level. So I'm going to kind of talk from two different sort of aspects of things, and things that I've kind of started to stumble over in the last year and that I've learned over time just dealing with different folks, and then kind of a framework of how to kind of put that into action. So one of the things that I started to notice is that you're given a team of folks, you're inheriting them to a large extent, and there is already work in progress a lot of times, and you need to deliver results associated with that. And those folks may be at various levels of competency, understanding along with that. And you walk into it expecting, well, now I'm the boss, I don't need to do anything. And that should be the case. However, one of the things that you need to understand is that you're there now to set the expectations of what level of quality they should be working toward. What's that shared common result that they should all be working towards at each of their different levels. And if they don't have the capacity, it's not your job to pick up and do for them what you used to do in your previous job. Oftentimes in government, you're kind of Peter Principled up to the manager level. But instead you're there to kind of teach, instruct, guide, allow them to at times even fail, knowing that you may have a less than desirable result, with the understanding that you will gain an employee that will have learned from that and be more motivated to success in the long run. So creating shared ideals around trust, empowerment, and support. And these are common themes that have kind of run throughout the two presentations that we just heard. First, you need to trust your employees. The worst thing you can do is start, I had a colleague of mine recently accused their employees of not working while they were teleworking. So trust broken down, shattered at that point, to the extent where they were talking to me about how several of their employees are now going around bad-mouthing them. So automatically, that person has already walked into a scenario where they establish that they don't trust their employees by even bringing that aspect up in a common group setting. So dealing with things at that higher level and breaking down those trust barriers then shatters the ability for those folks to be motivated to do their work. Instead, now they're motivated to be against that manager, which is one of the largest reasons why people leave. So the organizational culture in that team, which is a microcosm of the broader FedSim culture that I work within, was that I don't trust you that you're working on when you're teleworking, which is 3 out of the 5 days of the week in my office, more than not. So most of the time I say that you're not working. So you need to establish that trust at that high level and understand that you're looking at outcomes. So driving those outcomes, driving those results. And when you don't see outcomes from folks, that's when you start to address the outcome, not from a, I don't believe you're working when you're teleworking. You need to sit there and say, on this project, this happened, next time can we make sure that we get ahead of it? So use specific examples of how you can drive outcomes when you see those examples where you may not have established those trusted relationships. But over time, building that trust with that employee so that then you can be more hands-on. Empowering them to make decisions. So trust that they are a professional that's hired for that position to make those decisions. And then let them go off and make those decisions. Even if you may have a different opinion or may have a different way of having gone about it, there are multiple ways to get it done, even in the federal acquisition regulation system, which everybody thinks, and they all have strong opinions about the right ways to go about acquiring goods and services for the federal government. It's important to sit back and say, I was the expert, now this person's supposed to be the expert. I'm supposed to help guide and support them in that decision. So empowering them to make that decision and go off and lead that charge. And then if they fail or succeed, support them to continue making those decisions. And by supporting them, you're giving them also the resources that are available to teach them next time what maybe they could have done differently to get a better result out of that scenario. What were the tools that were there? What were the reasons why potentially they didn't see the desired result out of that? The other thing that I've realized is that you are no longer a employee who's off on their own and can kind of get their job done how they want to do it. You have to be available and you have to live up to the expectations that you set for your team. So if you're not there at 8 o'clock every day, your team's not going to think that they need to be there at 8 o'clock. If you show up late to meetings, then they'll show up late to meetings. If you cancel coffee with that team, then they'll not show up to coffee with the team. So setting shared expectations, living up to your own expectations that you have for your team, and being there for those meetings, being there for your team, and being available to get feedback and to give feedback to that team. So one of the things that came up at our table was autonomy, having too much autonomy, not feeling like you're supported by your manager. So that's kind of where the living up to expectations, being available and being there. And consideration, teaching people consideration. It kind of goes to the organizational culture. If you accept that profanity, and I kind of do actually accept that, but in a limited way and not never directed at a person in your organization, then everybody else is going to accept that that is fine. And then you start to see the breakdown in trusted relationships between your team members. Realize that you need to teach and create a culture of consideration amongst all of your team that also translates into consideration for their customer and citizenry for the broader organization. So at the team level, you're always in that microcosm culture that you're trying to drive better results for the larger organization. So one of the things that's helped me recently that I kind of started looking at was how government kind of manages on a broad scale with performance plans that is 1 to 5 rating scale. Well, like Alex was saying, companies are moving away from doing ratings. Companies are moving away from, here's your bucket of leave, you get 20 days off a year, and here's the rules around when you take leave. Moving to a culture of individuality. In a book I read recently called The End of Average, I was reading an anecdote about Costco. Costco's top wine buyer, Annette Alvarez, is somebody who worked their way up from being a cashier at Costco all the way up to being one of the top wine buyers in the world, globally. She influences the marketplace on what what wine distributors carry in stock because of her power and authority there. She got that way through the fact that Costco doesn't set standards of, well, you gotta do this and that, and they don't eliminate people because you don't have this MBA or that MBA, that law degree or something like that. Well, I guess if it's general counsel, I'd probably stop you from being a lawyer, but at the same time, they try not to limit expectations as much as they can. So they allow for people to kind of step into the roles that they think that they're good at and that they display characteristics at. And the culture of individuality and individual responsibility, people are then empowered to choose their own path through an organization. A lot of folks get hung up on, this is my resource, this is my person that I'm going to put in place. But when you do that, you fail to take into account that that resource may have a different opinion of what their job should be, and may have different traits that might not be suited for that. Or if they do desire to leave, you also have to understand that supporting them in their effort to grow as an individual, maybe even outside of your organization, will potentially come back and pay dividends because, especially in this area, folks go off to a customer, or FedSim, we work across all of government, or go off to a contractor that might better bid, deliver better service to one of FedSim's customers. You need to understand that encouraging the individual to grow into what they want to be will, in the long term, promote a better culture, not just within your organization, but within the broader microcosm of that economy that you work and operate in. So encouraging that sort of individuality that someone displays. And the last thing I kind of want to touch on is that have a tendency to focus on what people did wrong and then punish that by assigning a rating, by kind of sitting there and saying you messed up, versus talking about somewhere where the expectation was not what everybody wanted, and then focusing in on teaching how we could do it better. So focusing on developing a culture of teaching and learning from each other. So the leader's job in that scenario is to set the expectations and then try to get the team to have a shared understanding and teach each other of that larger expectation. So I see my function now more as a high school cool teacher than I do as a manager or boss, because it's no longer my job to produce work, it's my job to make sure that the results fit what the desired outcomes for the taxpayer are. That's generally kind of what I've learned over the first year of being a manager. I'm sure there's many more pitfalls, and then you always also have to understand that there's going to be that one or two person that really doesn't have a shared expectation of doing anything other than trying not to work. But with that, I'll kind of end, so I'll give some time back since we lost some time with the last talk.